Hello and welcome to another Pharaoh stream with myself, Pharaoh. And I'm taking another late lunch today to take you through the next year of Interwar art at the Royal Academy. How's things been? Well, I think we've had some of our best years so far, in my opinion. Some of my favourite years. 32, great. 33, also very strong. And I think what's nice is it's very strong both regards to its like the paintings of all mediums and also sculpture. And I would say that we're going to start to hit a bit of a divide in a bit, but I think there's a couple of good years left. And by that I mean, well, a couple of things are going on. I would say that the change of the king, the abdication, I think that's in 36, has quite a big impact. Secondly, there is a big scandal over a painting in a couple of years' time, and I'll mention that when we come to the correct year. And that also marks a large point where the RA chooses a different path, one more conservative. And again, I think, in my opinion, hopefully I've proven and shown to you all that the interwar period, certainly at the RA, is a much more radical period than one might think. You know, we've seen some pretty amazing modernist pieces, an attempt to kind of reconcile modernism and like classical ideas, even kind of new forms being pioneered at the Royal Academy as well. But I think it's difficult because should the Royal Academy be a place which always lets in the next generation of artists? To some degree, yes, you need this process of renewal, but at the same time, you need to kind of balance that. And I wonder whether the direction that the kind of the younger people were having was so far apart from where the RA wanted to be, and also like philosophically very different as well. And I would say that from this point, the kind of the youth, the next wave of artists, they've all been brought up on Fry's lectures from 20 years ago. I mean, if you think about Design and Vision and Transformations, I think they're both like 1920, 1922. And his focus on form over ideas of the sensual world. And I think that ties in very nicely with a lot of kind of abstract forms that are going to come out. And that's what the youth movements are trying to do. Now, I think the big failure, in my opinion, of the Royal Academy at this stage is its inability to create a vision of art that listens to what's being said while still attaching to forms of tradition. And I think there are so many artists that managed to do that over this period. But why do they not have apprentices? Why do they not have like students? One of the big successes of the Royal Academy was in its teaching staff. I'm thinking Lantieri, the Italian sculptor master in the 1910s, who basically taught a generation of Royal Academicians to sculpt, for example. They never managed to get someone who could reconcile. I think Wheeler came in the 60s, maybe, or 50s or 60s, but I think it was way too late by that point. And I think we're about to enter a dark point in the Royal Academy from about 1940. Anyway, that's a bit of an aside. There's still more to go, more good stuff. I think this is another pretty good year from lots of people, lots of interesting ideas. So let's get cracking. Now we're going to start out with this painting from Laura Knight. And Laura has had a pretty good run, I think, in the last couple of years of paintings. Again, I think she's at best when thinking about the female form. But I think she has shown a bit of range as well. She's kind of dabbled with a few kind of mythic subject matters. But she's back to portraiture here. And I think this is the Duchess of, let me just have a look through here, of Rutland. Yes. So this actually is from a famous house in the north. I'm going to say Harlow House. It's the one where Rex Whistler does the frescoes on the wall. Meant to be one of the top 5 houses in England, and obviously, like Duchess is relatively high up in the social order, and this is a very charming portrait of her. In some ways, it's quite traditional. So again, a lot of the society portraits like these full body, tall, long paintings, a la Sargent. So she's plugging into that mode. But 2 interesting things are going on. Firstly, the background, which almost looks like a theatre curtains, and I don't know a huge amount about the Duchess, if I'm honest with you, but I wonder whether if she's a patron of the arts or is interested in theatre. So it's kind of like, yes, there's a kind of society formality to it, but contextually it's been given that kind of casuality, and I quite like it in terms of its kind of subtlety. If you think about the kind of classic Renaissance paintings of a Renaissance man, like the Ambassadors, Holbein, or whatever, they just pile the paintings with things showing off that they can do, or here's the book because I'm great at reading, or here's my ship that I own because I'm a great sailor, etc. Well, why not? A patron of the theatre is placed on the stage. I also absolutely love this fat little bulldog in the corner across here, just absolutely snarling at us. And it's, I think we've seen a few kind of pets in some of these portraits, but I think it's interesting that even this kind of high end of society has got this kind of very casual format, and but it adds a little bit of roughness and rudeness to the actual portrait itself. I think if it was just her kind of floating in black space, a la Cope, another famous portrait painter, it could be a bit dull. But the I think the dog, particularly because it's like a fat old snarling beast, adds just so much character to the painting. I mean, the Duchess herself is beautifully rendered. I mean, what's her expression? It's there's serenity, nobility, maybe a little bit of a nervous personality coming through. Look at the kind of the hands on top of each other, and Lara's managed to do a really lovely job of the fur. I mean, she's not that interested in textiles. You can see she's gone for an even like a lighter than open approach to the fabric of the dress, but still enough to add a bit of interest. There's some nice verticalities with the folds of the curtains as well. I think that's a very clever way of creating some parallelism here. This purposely chosen fold to give a bit of kind of verticality, and also there's a little bit of perspective bending on the floor here, so you can really see the floorboards as she's treading the boards. Anyway, very, very nice one to kick us off, and a little bit different from Lara there. Okay, I mean, we've seen a couple of these from Russell Flint here, and this is very much his kind of like his 2 modes. One is the kind of basically female nude. Second is mythical allegorical scene with a group of females. I mean, he is by far one of the best female painters. Maybe it gets a little bit kitschy, I think, sometimes, a little bit kind of like, dare I say, pin-up-esque. But again, I think it's a very hard line, and I think he does write it very well. This one is called Creatures of Today, and I thought this is kind of interesting. What do we see? We see 3 women, but so I mean, just from the title, it would sound like these are the women of today. And maybe it does sum up that kind of like fierce woman from the 20s that's I should say 30s now coming through. However, he's going to contextualize it with a couple of classical motifs here. So, for example, we can see the boat behind, and the rolling wave motif is definitely, at the very least, you would say Mediterranean, but in my opinion, classical Grecian. If you look at her hands as well, can you see there's like a rattle? And I'm pretty sure that that's, again, another kind of classical style rattle. And then the third one is kind of like, I wasn't sure what this is. It looks to me like a bit like a kite or something like that. So, okay, maybe in fact, I'm changing my mind. Maybe that isn't a classical rattle. Maybe that is the string holder for the kite that's going to be pulled along. So, okay, I'm changing my position live on the stream now, which I'm allowed to do. Maybe it is like a group of women on holiday in some kind of Grecian isles. But I still think with that motif and stuff like that, he's kind of harking back to the Amazonians. I don't know, kind of powerful Grecian women of the past, you know. So it's not my favourite of the Russell Flints, if I'm honest with you. I think it's good. He renders all the figures well, but I think I quite like the Chione and Artemis one from last year or a couple of years ago. I thought that was much more strong composition, but still very nice there from Flint. I've got it in black and white as well, so you can see the background a little bit better. I mean, I think they're on the beach; it's clear, and then they've kind of got this boat which is kind of up against the side. Okay, speaking of the knights, going back to the knights again, we've got Harold, the husband of Laura, and this is Sir Gerald Wollaston, Garter, King of Arms. And again, I presume this is some kind of royal household role. So you've got something to do with the Order of the Garter, or maybe he's like the leader of the Order of the Garter, maybe. But I really quite like this. I mean, it's partly the dress. So you can see he's got this medieval tabard, which is placed on the top. His kind of beautifully hand embroidered jacket. He's got this lovely two chains of office and this rod of authority. But I think it's his kind of position and face which is the best part of this. There's something very standoffish about it. He's kind of literally blocking our pathway here. I mean, it's so direct. I think this is the most direct painting I think we've ever seen. But I think there isn't kind of like anger in his eyes at all. It's resolute duty and purpose. And he almost looks a little bit eternal, like he's a watcher. Maybe somewhere right now he still stands, Gerald, watching over the Order of the Garter, something like that. There's a little bit of textual context with the background here, which makes it a little bit interesting. But apart from that, I think it's very very fine and pretty good for Harold as well. I quite like it. Okay, we're on to the kind of master of the mezzotint, Frank Short. This is Screel Hill and Water. I would say that this is probably the most subdued we've seen Frank Short, if I'm honest with you. Frank has often done these very dramatic pieces. If you think back to those kind of sand dunes or whatever it was a while ago, and then there was a kind of a storm coming over. This is a little bit quieter. It's a night scene, and there's a lake with mountains in the background. You can see the moon across there in crescent form, giving a little bit of light to the darkness. And a small group of figures are either boarding or disembarking from a boat. And across the other side is a a light. So, there's a bit of mystery here. What are the Midnight Crew up to? I think there's definitely, it's atmospheric for sure, and I think just technically, I love what he's done with the reflection here, and I think again, this is true kind of etching mastery here, where he's really created a very beautiful copy in the background here of the above. So again, I think this is really a print for print nerds. Short's always pushing the boundaries, I think, with his prints, and this is very, very beautiful and technically skillful, although I sort of prefer the drama and the darkness of some of his other work. Okay, on to another Lavery here. This is the Honourable Mrs. Cunningham Reed, another kind of society beauty, lovely orangey wavy hair here. This was again another painting that Lavery that I kind of chose in black and white, and then managed to find this picture. I think it's a little bit oversaturated from the photo, if I'm honest with you, which takes away from it. But again, I think Lavery is on a bit of a roll, I think, with some of his paintings over the last couple of years, managing to produce some good quality stuff. This is a little bit risque, really. She's dropped her chemise down and showing a little bit of shoulder for us here, although she's doing it with these kind of half-dead, nonchalant eyes at the same time. So it's kind of very, very casual. Yeah, nice. But I sort of prefer this one here. This is another Lavery. This is Miss Ackroyd here. And this is, she's just been out for a hack. She's got a top hat, her kind of riding paraphernalia. I mean, some kind of whip maybe, and her riding dress. I mean, firstly, it's a great pose. There's casualness to it. She's kind of leaning against the side of the chest of drawers, and she's looking at us quite directly. Very, very, very angry, very stern, but also very, very structured, and like there's a bit of kind of softness with this right arm, I think, but still she gives us some kind of like a direct assault. I've got a shout out for the colors as well, because there's this beautiful mix of balance between yellows. So you can see the kind of waistcoats, yellows in the hair, yellows in the glove, and the hands themselves, and then the green, that one big shot of green in the background. So he's done a nice axis there. You've got an axis of the black and white as well. And then the brown, I mean, for me, registers as like a third tone to create like a little triad. But again, very nice. Lavery doing some good stuff recently. Now, this one is The Window. Algernon Talmage. I feel like Algernon is very much in the night school. I think he's a little bit younger, but again, he's doing the Vermeer thing. But again, another twist. Rather than having this kind of like middle class couple with what they're up to, it's these kind of intimate scenes of women. And again, this is basically an excuse for a nude contextualized to like the home. So the piece is called The Window. The window takes up the biggest piece of the canvas, although there is another window of sorts. She's arranged a mirror on the right hand side across there, and she is either, I think she's in a state of analysis. If you remember that Brockhurst piece, the Adolescent or whatever it's called, where she's kind of looking in the mirror, I think there's something of that with this piece, and the reason why is it looks to me like she's wearing heels. So again, why do you do that if not to kind of present yourself in a beautiful way? And look, she's put her hands up across her head, so she almost looks like Venus. So maybe the window is the window to that she's looking through to view herself. although you'd expect her to be so exposed from this gigantic window. There's something scandalous about this as well. The ruffled bed sheets on the side. So I think this is a piece that you could sort of gloss over quite quickly initially, but has a bit of depth to it at the same time. Let's just get rid of some of these. Okay, let's talk. Let's go to Stanley Spencer, and this is The Parents' Resurrection. So Stanley Spencer, very famous painter. I mean, I would describe his style as like 1910s modernism, again with a bit of reconciliation for the symbolic and the mythic, in the fact that he is painting in a very like stylized style, very much out of that kind of First World War modernist piece, but then it's contextualized in normally two ways. Spencer is very theological, so he brings in Christian themes and ideas, and the other is about like country life. He used to live in this small kind of like small little country. Well, he studied at Slade and then did some painting in London, and then moved out to the country for his kind of like prodigious period. And so it's interesting because I think the pure modernists and the extreme modernists are not interested in these subject matters or themes really. They're highly secular. They're almost kind of like sort of realists of a sort, even though the pictures themselves are almost unreal. So Spencer for me does represent like one of the paths I think the RA should have gone down or pushed or has tried to encourage, which was to reconcile the sensuousness of early modernism with the intellectual, basically. This piece by Spencer here is called The Parents' Resurrection. So again, the resurrection constantly comes back to this piece, and also all of these pieces I think end up in quite a famous chapel. It's a very sad story. I think there was an officer who died in the First World War, and his mother was like a lady, and she put all of like his inheritance towards building this small chapel on their property, and got Spencer to basically cover it with paintings. And it's a very famous and pretty spectacular memorial to a son, but also I think maybe one of the greatest theological spaces of the 20th century, really. And it was a lot of it's concerned with the resurrection. So this is called the Parents' Resurrection here, and you can see this is presumably some kind of grave site. There's two little scenes going on. You can see the graveyards continuing on in the background here, and this angel being a tomb. And these older gentlemen here, and you can tell them they're older because of their little pocket watch or Edwardian tie, are being pulled out of the ground and lifted up, almost like men with teeth sewed from the ground, I think. Then I think you can see the kind of family members trying to hold on to them there, sort of desperately grabbing them. The figures themselves look quite nonchalant, a little bit confused, a little bit stunned, dazed. So it's this interesting juxtaposition of confusion and admiration and love, this kind of outbearing of emotions. These three figures kind of look on, maybe their parent hasn't been resurrected yet, or the person they found hasn't come out, or that maybe they're just here to witness the event. Either way, I think it's a very powerful piece, and again, something you could write off as kind of sentimental or um, like too modern. But again, I think he sort of walks the line very well, and it's a nice example of Spencer here. On to something very different, we've got another Brockhurst here, the master of the dual tones, coming in hard with this piece called Yggdrasil, named after the world tree in Viking mythology. And Yggdrasil here is represented by a woman, and she's got this amazing curly hair, like nothing I've ever seen before, kind of straight at the top, curls either side, almost oriental features, and kind of collar and cuff of her clothes. She's holding this funny, again, oriental fan with a beautiful lapis lazuli ring on her fingers. And again, he's just playing. He's a real colorist, I think, Brockhurst. Yes, the portrait of the woman, that like the design is very beautiful. He's rendered the hands and face so accurately. But then the real beauty, I think, is in the range of colors, which really start with yellow, go through to this kind of sickly green, into there's little hints of teal to a darker Prussian blue here, and again maybe like a midnight purple, something like that. So it's actually like it's a very tight color scheme, really, in terms of, we're going from a classic contradicting colors, blues and yellows, but then he's kind of pulled in lots of little colors in between to kind of keep the feeling as well. I really like this big. This is definitely one of Brockhurst's better works, and there's a kind of interest with the fan itself. What looks to me like some kind of ship sail and ship sailing off into the distance here. And we've got this other piece, which is Jeunesse Dorée, which is like the young woman Dorée. A little bit more confrontational here. She's kind of looking directly at us. A little bit more of a realist piece as well. I think it's kind of, there's a lot more time spent on the rendering. Like, look at the kind of coat here, relatively light, really, but there's so much depth around the cardigan. He's got these kind of the bows and the lovely buttons. This is more about like Brockhurst in his kind of hyper-realist vein. Very, very accurate, but still, like, this for me is like, yes, it is like a hyper-realist piece. So again, like, look at that face. He's rendered it almost as accurately as possible, but then he still contextualizes it in this great color landscape, places her in this kind of rocky, like non-place. And I think this is where, again, I think he's taking a format and making it more interesting, because I think if this was just Dorée painted in an exceptionally real way, it would be a dull painting, even despite the detail. It'd be technically great, but he uses it well, and again, he is a colorist primarily, and he's working with those colors to say, look, yes, I am a technical master, really, but I'm also a master of colors as well. Okay, we've got this interesting piece here from Spencer Watson. Again, good to see him back on the classical. He had an absolute stonker with Venus, I think it was last year. This is called the rehearsal. I mean, in my opinion, I think it's kind of like a classic riff on the kind of there is like a format of the nymph and the satyr. The wood nymph and the satyr is like a proper motif, where satyr is constantly kind of chasing after the nymph, and I think there are allusions to this in the fact that we've got this kind of male figure and female figure, and it initially looks like it could be some kind of chase. So it looks like she's kind of going off in the distance, and he's kind of chasing after with those feet. But we see that he's actually sitting down. So there's that kind of weird, like I said, there's a definite hat tip to that. Also, if you look, like, it's definitely a man, so it's obviously not a satyr. And again, there's nothing kind of woodlandy really about the woman to kind of show that she is a wood nymph. But still, I feel like maybe there's something. For example, the loincloth there, very much, it's quite furry, doesn't it? So that's why I feel like he's putting these like different illusions in there. Or I think you could read it as this is some kind of Grecian setting, and it's a dance, and it's simply a flute player doing the dance in these kind of lovely Grecian islands, and you can see these kind of lovely islands in the background, the trees springing up. I mean, I really love the female figure on the left. I think she's so delicate. I think Spencer Watson does paints women so well. And again, the turning of the head back gives it that kind of profile feeling, like it's almost like from a Grecian vase. And I do wonder if that's some point of inspiration for him. I'm less keen on the male figure. I think there's a lot of dynamism in that top half where he's kind of folded in on himself. He's holding the flute in I think quite a strange way personally, but that kind of adds a little bit of awkwardness. But then it's the feet, like I think he's trying to give that illusion of movement without moving, almost like he's kind of tapping his toes and moving along to the music. I think and let's mention this fun little dog, which is kind of sitting there just lapping the sun and laughing with this tongue out. I think the piece is nice. I think is a very respectable piece here from Spencer. Right, we've got another Kodak Keeper. I mean, I won't talk too much about it. I think this is just, again, a nice young woman painting, which I think he's fallen into. He's trying to change things up a little bit. So he's got her leaning on a bundle of furs. Nice background, it's kind of like this moonlit on the veranda of a stately home. But I still feel like it's still kind of sitting within the same paradigm of what he's been painting for the last 10 years, which is okay. Like I think for some painters it's okay to just do the same thing over and over and over again. But of course, you're never going to build up as much broad appeal, are you really? And I think he's maybe suffering a little bit of being known for something and then having to do it. Okay, let's have a look at one of the better pieces from this year, and it's our good friend JB Soter, the Scot. And I think the Soter's had some very respectable paintings actually the last decade. I really like his style, which is, this is something of John Duncan in them actually almost, but much more classical as opposed to medieval mythic. This is another attempt at Venus, and I think I absolutely love this. Very, very novel, but also very, very beautiful. So what do we see? Let's go straight to the main lady herself, Venus on the seashell, yes, but rather than have her kind of surfing along on this kind of scallop shell, he's put her in this kind of large sea snail, and then reclining. So this is clever because obviously reclining Venus is a classic mode of Venus. So he's had her arriving like she's normally depicted in many kind of Renaissance paintings. So it's a clever take on the shell again, and he said, "Oh, actually, everyone goes for the scallop. I'm going to go for something different." He's then making reference to the kind of past of Venus herself. And then I just love her pose. I think just the Venus herself could be just such a beautiful, beautiful painting here. There's confidence, there's a serenity, but she's almost kind of like waking up as well. I think he's taken a little bit of Alfred Turner there. I think she's not exactly happy. She's kind of like, it's almost like she's woken up from a long dream, not knowing who she is. And it doesn't have like, again, compared to the Spencer Watson Venus, who's just kind of confident, powerful woman. She's much more soft and delicate, still awakening to her powers. Then let's talk about those around her. Well, she's being lifted onto land by some centaurs, which again, very novel. Centaurs aren't really associated with Venus, really, from my understanding. But I think it's a really like an interesting moment. So again, rather than her kind of floating in the surf away from the shore, this is the moment where Venus hits the shore, and look how happy they are to have love arrive. Now, surrounding them are all kind of like sea nymphs. I think they're all women. This one is a bit debatable, but I think you can see a bit of a breast there, and you can tell that because two are floating in the water, and then one's like an octopus and one's like a proper old school mermaid, and they're two are giving these kind of horns of like of notice, saying, look, our queen's about to arrive. And I particularly like this one at the front here with this giving the coral flower there. I think, again, that's such a clever idea. This is, again, if you go to Botticelli, it's like he uses normal flowers as part of the arrival. And again, I think this is so much more in keeping and fitting. There's some difficult poses in here. I mean, for example, this woman, she's leaning backwards, going upside down and playing a trumpet at the same time. I think this is such an awkward pose, but I think that's a 10 out of 10 rendering of it. Really good. These figures at the bottom, I think, are a little bit more janky, in my opinion. And actually, if he could do a repaint on these two faces, he should have. Like, it's such a difficult position because it's like head up foreshortened. It just never looks good. It's just not like an attractive pose. So I think he's sort of losing off the back of it. But I think it's such a shame because I think this is a real beautiful painting, one of Sauter's best. And again, like a masterful retelling of the Venus story. One last shout out. Oh, yeah, we should talk about the birds again. They're sort of, celebrating the arrival, but they also are kind of being a bit annoying as well, which I quite like. Sauter has encountered gulls before. And then one last thing, I love this little cheeky starfish slapped against the back leg of the centaur there. Totally brilliant. I love this. I think this is a really beautiful rendering. Exactly what should be at the heart of the RA. Why wasn't Sauter brought in to teach as a professor? This is what you should know, is that like something happens where all the best guys of the interwar period, they just never end up in institutions apart from in the sculptural sense. Anyway, lovely. We've got another Stanley Spencer here. This is the meeting. This is kind of interesting. I think we're getting like a little view of some lovers meeting in a back alley. And again, he loves to have this kind of like rural countryside moments. Yes, there's a brickwork, but there's all this kind of naturalism coming through, trees all around. You've got these kind of very stylized, awkward figures. The woman clearly in some kind of fleece, and we can't fur, but we can't see her face at all. But we can see there's a bit of anxiousness with her hands here. She's kind of holding them together, and he's trying to allay her fears. So one does wonder whether it's some kind of adulterous liaison, maybe. In the foreground, we see a little figure. Maybe it's a child running around at the back, or maybe another figure observing what's happening and what's going on. But still, I think quite nice. Definitely of interest, and I like the kind of stylized coat of the lover across here. Onto something very different. This is Anne Swinnerton, The Letter. I mean, there is still a bit of historicism knocking about, and I mean, something like this is very much in the vein of your Millet, your mid-century Victorian, almost sentimental kind of love moments with a slice of historicism. This is some kind of obviously young woman who's received a letter, looking through this kind of beautiful glass across there, illuminated. Something definitely of the old masters about this as well, the kind of light and darkness, chiaroscuro. But again, I think the piece definitely stood out because it was so different to everything else that was out there. So it's kind of interesting that this kind of stuff gets still knocking around. Although again, I think this kind of stuff tends to be kind of one-offs that don't really last that long. Okay, on to some sculpture. We've got the great Welsh sculptor Goscombe John, and this is Audrey. We haven't seen much portraiture really from the sculptors. They tend to be working in more of, again, the mythic setting, classical setting, or allegorical. I mean, there is a lot of portraiture going on, I would say, but I've chosen not to put a lot of it into it because I just don't think it's that interesting stylistically or contextually. I think sculptural portrait is difficult, I think, because there is such a tendency to be accurate, and the demand of the clients is to be accurate. So while, for example, in the painting world, you can be accurate in something like the face and then do more stuff in the background, like we've seen, like if you go from Dixie to Orpen, for example, just worlds away, and you can create those kind of moods and styles. You just can't do that in sculpture because sculpture is fundamentally about the form. So if you go and do something quite stylistic, your sitter is not going to be happy because there's so much emphasis on the form and the face. And we saw even like with Sergeant Jagger's portrait from like 6 or 7 years ago, it really has to stick to the sitter, I think, or they won't be happy. This piece I thought was interesting because, yes, it is portraiture, but again, there is more style in there. There is a little bit more interest, and this is little young Audrey here. Young girl, and you can see from her kind of youthful face and kind of cute 20s hair, a couple of flowers in the hair as well. And he's got her with her hands in front of her. But again, this is about the kind of cloth and stylization of that. Yes, it is pretty accurate and naturalistic, really. But I still thought there was a lot of stylization in there, and I think because it's a younger sitter, I think he's been able to get away with more, and I think it is a more interesting bit of sculpture because of that. I think there is this theme of the gawky teenager as well that we've seen as like a minor note in portraiture, and again, I think you can see her shoulders a little bit forward. This isn't the most awkward of poses. This is the most natural of poses, and her face isn't really displaying kind of beauty or the kind of first fruits of womanhood, really. But then I still think it's a little bit standoffish, but I think still kind of very, very interesting and stylistic as a portrait goes. Right, on to Wheeler. I don't know if I've done an intro to Wheeler, but basically I'd say that Wheeler is one of the most significant sculptors of this period, not for his work, weirdly enough, at this stage. I think he does do some very significant works which are going to define the generation. But he's quite a young lad at this stage. So he's almost kind of like the last stage of classical, or I should say medieval modernist sculptors. So again, we've seen Macmillan and Reed Dick, I would say, being the two prominent forces, but they're both getting on. But at this point, Macmillan still's got many years to go, to be fair, and Wheeler is this kind of new force coming through. Although he tends to be, I would say, a little bit more. He's the most extreme of the medieval modernist, really, and actually sits in two camps, because I would say that there are really two fundamental sculptural forces going on, or groups. There are the extreme modernists of the Fry ilk, and there are the medieval modernists following out of both the new sculpture guys, and also taking a little bit from Fry at the same time. I think it's just how much Fry do you take. Wheeler takes more than most, and because of that, I think he sits between both camps. But he is always way more realist. So just in terms of the other camp, think about your Hepworth, Moore, Bretzkia, even, where again they are very much focused on, let's just say, international influences and like vitalist primal forces, etc. Something like this it's called perpetuation, though. It is definitely in that kind of medieval sense. Look, he's got on this kind of medieval capital. The perpetuation itself is like an allegorical motif. So it's interesting that, like, this is straight up medievalism, in my opinion. But this kind of long and thin pose comes straight out of a tribalistic ivory carving. If you see some of the kind of inspiration that they were taking from, if you like, imagine like an ivory tusk, imagine like a tribesman carving into it, it creates this very kind of long and thin curved form, and that's what we're seeing here. And Wheeler does do a lot of, like, one big thing I haven't really talked about on the sculptural side is there is a big movement for direct carving out of stone. So this would have originally been one large piece of stone, although it's kind of weird because this is obviously like Portland or soapstone, something like that, but he's kind of made it a little bit wider than he needs to be. So, do you know what I'm saying? It's not like he's carving from a tusk, but he's taking that kind of that movement from it and including it in the stonework. Perpetuation, what does it mean? I guess they're carrying on, and maybe there's something of mother and child. So, you know, it's that kind of newness and oldness going on. I would have loved to have seen this in the round, but wasn't able to find it. But I think he's done such a good job with some of the detailing on the fabric. Again, definitely taking hints from Reed Dick here, but putting a new twist on it. You know, this much more curvaceous. He's almost done it as like a pattern on the body here. Now we've got Morning Woman from Richard Garb. I mean, this is kind of interesting for me because there we saw the Reed Dick's lady. I forgot her name now. She's riding on a seashell. Very gothic piece. This, for me, again, feels very gothic, and the reason why it's two things: the pose, which is like weight on one side of the body creating a curved form. That is like a classic Gothic pose. If you see a lot of like Mary Mothers, etc., all of the weight is on one hip. You can't really see the feet, but there's an implication of like a contrapposto or something like that. But it's all covered up by the textiles. One knee forward, and heavily textured and textiled. And this is what we see in the Garb piece, really. You can see the kind of knee poking through all of this kind of texture. But rather than kind of like having a Christ child in the hand and typically like the big headdresses, he's got a head tilted, hands together, hair down, in this both very kind of like sensuous, but also and like sensuous, intimate, but also melancholic pose here. I mean, the face itself, I wouldn't say is like it's meant to be mourning. There are there tears. I feel like she's sort of looking off into the distance, reflecting on the lost love or whatever. But really like this, and again shows this kind of new shoots of some kind of interesting moves that these sculptors were going down. Speaking of Garb, this is a really interesting piece. Garb does a lot of stuff in ceramics because of his connection with Royal Dalton, and did a series of masks. This is one of them, which is the Lion of the East. And you've got this interesting face with a crown on it and two lions. Now, what is the ethnicity of the gentleman? For me, I think he almost looks Asiatic or something like that. But then the lions, the double lion motif reminds me of the lion door in Assyria. There's a famous door with a double lion carved on top. So I wonder whether it's kind of like harking back to the kind of Assyrians. And also another reason why that is because the Assyrians are a kind of key area of inspiration for sculptors of this time as well. But I love the glaze on this. It's like really nice. I mean, one thing I don't like is the moustache, and he's attempted to do all these kind of dots on the top, and I think it's this horrible prepubescent like moustache fluff. I think he should have just gone straight up for a big old beard if he wanted to have that, rather than this horrible like. It almost reminds me of like a African tattoo or something like that. You know, the scarification. But still, I think there's just a lot of feeling and emphasis in the eyes here. Really interesting, and cool to see some ceramic work as well. I mentioned William McMillan. I mean, we saw an absolute banger of his, I think, last time, and I think this is a really good follow up, which is as a mother and child classic motif here, and it's a similar model to we used last time, and I think she's just totally brilliant, so beautiful. Look at the eyes and the smile there, just so much confidence. She's staring into our souls. I think she's really, but she's also got this delicateness. Look at that kind of hand. She's going to be either holding a textile or holding onto the ground or something. The pose is a little bit awkward, but I really love the head on the painting, on the sculpture. And I really love the child, actually. I think it's so difficult to represent children because they look weird. I hate to say this, that because of the heads are disproportionately large. If you sculpt them as they are, I think it looks weird. And I think that's where a lot of medievals went wrong. They try and say, look, let's render a child as is. And so it often just looks horrific. I think Macmillan has actually shrunk the head. I have a 2-year-old, and that's what it looks like. He looks more like a 1.5-year-old. I would say the head proportionately should be larger for a body of this big. But then it works. For me, it works a lot better though. You know, the representation is brilliant. The pose is brilliant here as well. There's nothing, you should know by now how much I hate the kind of the fat chubby pooty. This is not the fat chubby pooty. It's this kind of stretching out child. There's playfulness. There's fun. There's he's playing with his mother's hair at the same time. This is what a child is like, not like a frolicking tubster. Okay, we've got another Fleetwood Walker here. This is the Maidens. Just another good excuse for a nude. Walker likes to have this kind of the natural nude, though, like the nude out and about. We saw the kind of mother and child, I think, last time, and no, she was with some flowers. This time they're out with some trees, but there's a bit of a picnic going on, having a couple of apples, and it's almost kind of like we've intruded upon them, and you've got this kind of quite annoyed looking face from this woman here, and she's starting to cover herself up, knowing that men are nearby. So you get this idea of, maybe they're kind of Amazonian, free from the tyranny of man, and they've finally been found. Really, really nice. Fleetwood Walker is brilliant for the nude. Okay, we've got here. This is Richard Garb's another like a decorative group for Water Garden. And I really like this piece. Again, it's difficult to see. Let me just try and zoom out a little bit here. There we go. But this is okay. It's a decorative group for a water garden. So already this piece is probably going to be part of a pond or a fountain. And it's kind of like a water nymph allegorical piece here. We've got this long and thin, and the woman is kind of standing one leg underwater, which is quite cool. The kind of show depicted the water, the fish underneath, the seaweed across there, and she's actually sitting on a kind of a classical dolphin, or at the very least a large fish. And then her hair is kind of flaring up in like almost like she is underwater. So there's this kind of interesting. I mean, she looks like a nymph or something like that, doesn't she? She's just attached to the water, and I love this hair kind of evoking the sense of water, even though she's out of it. Really interesting piece there. Okay, we haven't heard from Pegram for like years at this stage, so it's interesting. This is an Oread. I should have probably looked up what an Oread is before this, but I forgot to. I presume it's some kind of classical figure, maybe related to Dionysus, I think. And like, what is she doing? Well, she looks like she's pulling her hair apart, or straining it, or curving it, etc. Interesting piece from Pegram. I mean, I'll just put it in there because it's nice to see what he's up to. I think he just never really finds his footing in the same kind of way. I think some good pieces, but never truly great in my opinion. But still, a bit different. Shows you like what's happening from an academic perspective here. Okay, we've got Wheeler with The Artist's Wife. This is another good portrait, I think. I mean, this is already definitely in the Renaissance style. So there's a lot of Quattrocentro busts which are like this, kind of from the top upwards. And he's added a bit of stylization on it at the same time, so you can see the kind of wavy hair, the kind of more gauntness, but it's still, there's a realness at the same time. And I really appreciate portraits that attempt to stylize people, and I think this is, there's definitely tones of the Renaissance, tones of kind of some kind of medieval work, and very, very beautiful piece in itself. So the base is a little bit strange, isn't it? This kind of weird fluting, but still very nice here. Right, and we're going to round out with this large cathedral from Lutyens here. Now, this is actually a model of design for Liverpool Cathedral, which is a Catholic cathedral, and it basically never got built. Lutyens created this scale model, which I think is fascinating. I think it's really interesting. The whole thing's fascinating. Lots of great work tied into it as well, that was created but then never actually executed. The floor plan to me looks like a Greek cross with a large dome on the top. One immediately thinks of Hagia Sophia. Very Romanesque at the same time because of all of this red brick, but then there's some definite Baroque airs to it. Firstly, if you look at the polychrome Portland stone and brick, I'm thinking very Wren, There's little pediments across the top here, this little archway, and then the detailing on the top of the dome as well. Very, very Baroque. So it's kind of interesting. It almost has a kind of quasi-Byzantine feel. Maybe that's just the format of the size. Romanesque in the earliest senses, but also a little bit Renaissance-y, a little bit Baroque. It's pulling from all over the place. Most of all, it's a very classic Lucian's monumental work, and I feel like we don't really appreciate Lucian's monumental style because most of his greatest works are in Empire, basically. You know, the New Delhi, etc. So it's a real shame to miss out on that, because I think it would have been amazing to have like a monumental work actually in the UK. But I think it's really brilliant. I mean, I'm less keen on this little bit of nonsense at the top. I think this is a little bit fanciful and a bit silly. And again, maybe I think just capping that off with a great big huge triumphal arch on the top here would have been so much better. But I'm not the great architect. I mean, again, he has really appreciated the role of sculpture in the work as well. So someone else like Baker, who then goes on to do some works in South Africa and the Bank of England. He also really appreciates the role of sculpture and architecture, and this is a real great age of that reconciliation. And Reed Dick was the artist chosen to kind of do a lot of work for it. I would have loved to see more sketches. I should do some more research about this. This is just inspiring me now. Also, just love these two. There's a lot of depth to it as well. These kind of interesting little kind of subdomes across there. Clearly more sculptural work. I mean, what a magnificent building this would have been if it was only made. I think what they got was like like a 1970s brutalist monstrosity. I mean, I don't know. Actually, I quite like the Liverpool Catholic Cathedral. I think it's quite cool, really. But I think this would have been way more epic and world-defying. But the wheel turns. Britain runs out of money thanks to the war, and this never got built. But truly monumental. They got this out again for like a Royal Academy show a couple of years ago. I think I may have seen it, but I could be wrong. But what a model! Would love to see this again. Anyway, that's it for this year. I think all in all, has been some pretty strong pieces. One of my favourites from the year. Let's have a look. I mean, definitely the Lutyens one for sure. Maybe the Yggdrasil from Brockhurst. And then I would say my favourite sculpture was probably the Richard Garb decorative group for Watergarden. So that is it. Let us say goodbye for now, and I will see you all next year.